Cat Country 107.3 Mornings with Joe and Jahna. We're happy to welcome from the Oak Ridge Boys, Richard Sterban. Richard, good morning.
Hello.
Well, good morning to both of you. It's my pleasure to be able to talk to both of you and your fine listeners out there.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to start out on a little sad note. Our condolences to you and the band on the passing of Joe Bonzel. He was such a great guy.
Incredible.
There's no question about it. You know, he was my best friend. We actually knew each other long before we became members of the Oak Ridge Boys. And back in those days, we never dreamed that we would end up spending over 50 years together as members of the Oak Ridge Boys. But our friendship goes way back, and even though we all knew what was coming, you know, when it finally happened, it was still a difficult thing to take. We're all kind of struggling with it right now.
Oh, I'm sorry for that. Richard, you're actually a South Jersey guy yourself. You went to Collingswood High School. And Joe,
you're right. I went to Collingswood High School. Absolutely, yes.
That's incredible.
And Joe was from Philly. Tell us how you guys, two Philly, South Jersey guys, ended up in a country quartet in Tennessee.
Well, you know, it's kind of an interesting story. You know, I helped organize my own group, and we were singing strictly on the weekends, but I had to have a regular job during the week, and I actually sold men's clothing at a place called Gimbel Brothers in Philadelphia, a big department store there. And Joe would come in there, and he knew I was working there, and you know he had his own group, a family group called the Faith Four, and he would come in occasionally and buy some shirts for me, and we talk about singing, you know, we talk about music. And we never dreamed that someday we'd end up in the Oak Ridge Boys. But it just shows that our friendship goes way, way, way back.
Now, before the Oak Ridge Boys, you actually did some work with Elvis, correct?
Cool.
For about 2 years prior to joining the Oak Ridge Boys, I sang in a group called J.D. Stumber in the same quartet. And for about a year and a half of that time, I actually sang with King of Rock and Roll. I sang with Elvis himself. You know, back then Elvis was the biggest star in the world, and his tour was the biggest tour in the music business. And to be a part of it was very, very exciting. I had some great memories of those times. You know, I got to know Elvis just a little bit, and it really was a special time in my life.
And how did you get from there to the Oak Ridge Boys?
Well, that's a great question, because while I was singing with Elvis back in 1972, which is 52 years ago now, I got a phone call from William Lee Golden of the Oak Ridge Boys. Now, he's the guy in our group, as you know, with the long beard.
Yeah.
You know, he's probably the most recognizable character in our group. But back then, he was Mr. GQ. He did not have that long beard. But he called me, and he said that the bass singer in the Oak Ridge Boys was leaving, and the Oak Ridge Boys wanted to know if I would be interested in taking the job. So here I was, apparently on top of the world, singing with the King of Rock and Roll. But I had to make a decision, like, what do I do?
Yeah.
You know, and I have to admit that at the same time, I was a big fan of the Oak Ridge Boys. I felt like the group had a great deal of potential, and I wanted to be a part of it. So back in 72, I made the decision to leave Elvis and to join the Oak Ridge Boys. And, you know, back then a lot of people questioned that decision. How can you do that? You know, but I really believed I was doing the right thing. I kind of followed my heart. And now 52 years later, I can look back and think, you know, I made a pretty good decision back then.
That is awesome.
History stood the test of time. You definitely won out with that one, sir.
And, you know, and it's kind of interesting. Along those same lines, back then I was a young guy in my 20s, and I had no idea when I was on stage with the Oak Ridge Boys, with the Stamps back then, that someday I would be in the same Hall of Fame together with Elvis. You know,
awesome.
If you go into the Country Music Hall of Fame now in downtown Nashville, go into the Rotunda, you'll see the four faces of the Oak Ridge Boys in bronze on the wall. Then you look around the room there and you'll see Elvis in bronze. You'll see Johnny Cash, you know, Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers. You know, the list goes on and on. And for the Oak Ridge Boys to be there is a tremendous honor. But I never dreamed of it back in those days that it would happen someday.
That is so cool. Now, as you guys were really getting rolling there in the 1970s, you actually did something in pop music with a singer named Paul Simon. How did that happen?
You are absolutely right. You know, we sang with Paul Simon, and you know, one day he got in touch with us. You know, and he had a hit record with a black gospel group called "Loves Me Like a Rock," he wrote this song slip sliding away, and he wanted a white. I'm not trying to sound racist. I don't mean it that way, even a little bit. But he wanted a white gospel group, and he called the Gospel Music Association. They recommended he called the Oak Ridge Boys, so he called us. And once again, here we found ourselves on a plane flying to New York City for the first time in my life. I flew first class. He put us up. We ended up in the studio in New York City with Phil Ramone producing, and we sang on that record, Slip Sliding Away. It was an amazing experience.
It's cool to go back and listen to that song because, I grew up with a lot of that music, and, hey, that's the Oak Ridge Boys. I never knew that.
And we never really got credit on the record for being those background vocals, but that definitely was us. And I remember back when that song was a hit, I'd be driving in my car. I remember pulling up to a red light, and that song was playing on the radio. And I looked over to the car parked next to me, and I was wondering if they were listening to the same radio station I was, because I wanted to roll down the window and say, "Hey, listen to that! That is me on there."
I love that. Your story is so cool too, because you know what? Like, it's just a testament to the fact that you should always say yes to experiences that come your way, because you just never know how they're going to turn out. I mean, look at all of the things that you've gotten to do in your career that you just said you never, ever, ever would have thought that would have happened for you. So that's just, and it's a really incredible story.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And while you were saying that, another name came to my mind, and that's Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
Johnny Cash was a dear, dear friend of the Oak Ridge Boys. We would not probably be here today if it wasn't for Johnny Cash and the help that he gave us. So that was an amazing experience that we were able to have in our career.
Cat Country 107.3, we're talking with Richard Sterban of the Oak Ridge Boys. They're at the Ocean City Music Pier on Wednesday. I got to ask you about the song Elvira, one of your biggest hits. How did that song come to you guys? And who said, Richard, you need to do this papa pow mau wow stuff?
Well, that's another great question. And there was a gentleman, and I don't think he's even alive anymore. His name was Ron Gant, and he was a song plugger for Tree Publishing. He happened to be on vacation in Texas somewhere, and he was in a country bar. He heard the group perform Elvira in the country bar. When he heard that song, he said, "Wow, that is a great song for the Oak Ridge Boys." When he got back to Nashville, he got Dallas Fraser's version of that song. Dallas Fraser wrote the song. He got it, and he sent it to a gentleman named Ron Chansey, who was our producer. Ron produced most of the number one hits on the Oak Ridge Boys over the years. And I remember the day, to answer your question, the day we got into the studio, it was Ron Chansey's idea for me to do that giddy up, papa, mau, mau part. And so basically what I did, I just took that simple line and just kind of adapted it to my way of doing things. And I think it probably turned out okay.
Legendary.
It's probably one of the most well-known bass lines in the music business.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, we mentioned you're from South Jersey. You actually had some property in Atlantic City, a condo for a time, correct?
Absolutely. There was a place and I believe it's still there, called Ocean Club Condominium.
Yes.
Yep.
And my wife and I, we own two condos in there, and we a lot of time we didn't even come down there in the wintertime when there was snow on the boardwalk, believe it or not. But we loved our time at the shore, And in fact, it's kind of interesting you would talk about, Atlantic City. I was just talking to my wife a few minutes ago here that, years ago when I went to Collingswood High School, I ran on the cross-country team. And I remember the day we had a cross-country meet against Atlantic City High School. And the race was actually on the boardwalk.
Wow. Right
there in Atlantic City. That's something I'll never forget.
And you still have family down here, I believe, even Ocean City?
But yeah, my sister has a condo here, and she lives in Medford Lakes right now. So and I have cousins and relatives that still live here in New Jersey.
That's awesome. I went to Camden Catholic, Richard, so I'm familiar with that area where they're at up there.
Oh, yes, that's great, yes.
What can we expect from your show at the Ocean City Music Pier?
Well, you can expect, pretty much what you expect. And that is, you're definitely going to hear me do giddy up, papa, mau, mau. That will definitely happen. You're going to hear Elvira. And not just Elvira, but you're going to hear Y'all Come Back Saloon, our first hit ever, American Made, Dream On, a lot of the hit songs that the Oak Ridge Boys have been able to have over the years. We're going to do a lot of those hits. We're now being produced by Dave Cobb, and we'll throw in a few new pieces of music produced by Dave Cobb. He's one of the hottest guys in Nashville right now. And we have a gospel music background, and we're patriotic guys. We'll honor our country and our veterans. It's just going to be a great night of good country music and good family entertainment. That's what the Oak Ridge Boys are all about. And in Ocean City, I think it's a perfect location.